A pagan temple. And when you pray, do not use vain repetitions as the heathen do, for they think that they will be heard for their many words. Therefore do not be like them. Matthew 6:7-8. This fragment is all that remains of the monumental statue of a god or emperor that once stood in Caesarea. The term God had an entirely different meaning to pagans than to Jews and Christians. For Jews and Christians, God is the all-powerful creator of the universe and everything within it. Pagans, on the other hand, saw their deities as the highest of three species of beings. The relations between the species were somewhat of a sliding scale. Caligula could make his horse a senator, and Augustus and other rulers could become gods merely by moving up the scale that began with animals and ended with the gods. Pagans made offerings to the god of their choice in expectation of initiating a contract that would be honored in the same manner as a contract between humans. Visiting the temple was part of paying homage to the deity. That was the time when, to effect compliance with the contract, the god would be worn down with prayers, much as a merchant would wear down a potential customer in any way he could, including with gifts and vows, in an effort to sell his goods. The deity, therefore, was considered a patron and a friend who could be influenced. Judeo-Christian faith in God as the Almighty Father presents a powerful contrast to the pagan view of religion. In the words of Jesus, "For your Father knows the things you have need of before you ask him." Matthew 6:7-8. The space dedicated to the pagan deity began as a simple square enclosure. This form of architecture dated from the early days of Roman religion, when augurs, priests whose task it was to tell the future, were required to divide the space where they practiced into equal-sized quadrants corresponding to the points on the compass. Later, as temples became more elaborate, they contained a statue of the deity to which they were dedicated in a raised area accessed by steps. A colonnaded outer porch served as a gathering place for supplicants, as only priests were allowed to enter the temple's inner sanctum. Temples were constructed either on high places or on raised platforms to increase the impression they made. Some Roman temples had as many as 6 stepped terraces before the inner sanctum was reached. An altar for offerings sometimes stood at the base of the steps. Steps leading to the temple Herod built for Augustus in Sebastia. A temple was seen a great way off by those sailing for that haven, and had in it 2 statues, the one of Rome and the other of Caesar. Antiquities 15:9-6. The City Gate. The city gate and market. A contemporary market scene. For no one buys their merchandise anymore. Merchandise of gold and silver, precious stones and pearls, fine linen and purple, silk and scarlet, every kind of citron wood, every kind of object of ivory, every kind of object of most precious wood, bronze, iron, and marble, and cinnamon and incense, fragrant oil and frankincense, wine and oil, fine flour and wheat, cattle and sheep, horses and chariots, and bodies and souls of men. Revelation 18:11-13. The city gate was a bustling place. In its spacious inner court, the agronomos had his tax station where salt and various types of produce would be weighed, and the customs owed on it would be calculated and paid. A money changer's booth was on hand as well. Passers-by would pause in the inner court of the gate to play games of chance. Pedestrians, litter-bearers, and pack animals vied for space, but due to a law enacted throughout the empire in the days of Emperor Marcus Aurelius, no wagons or other vehicular traffic were allowed in the city during the daylight hours. Soldiers were on duty at the top of the 36-foot-high towers and the tops of the 24-foot-high crenellated walls. At night, they would close the enormous wooden gates, which would be reopened only at dawn. The wooden gates had a small opening that allowed a passage after the identity of the person without had been ascertained, even when the gate itself was closed. This is probably the type of gate Jesus referred to when he said, "Enter by the narrow gate, for wide is the gate and broad is the way that leads to destruction, and there are many who go in, because narrow is the gate and difficult is the way which leads to life, and there are few who find it." Matthew 7:13-14. The ark was a part of the northern gateway to the walled city of Jerusalem in the late Roman era. Deep grooves discovered in the upper part of the gate were probably made by the saddles of camels heavily laden with merchandise as they passed through the gate on their way to the city market. Spices and other commodities from around the world were hawked in the markets of big cities such as Caesarea. Currency and prices. The pruta or mite. The pruta or mite. The earliest form of the pruta was minted by Alexander Jannaeus 103 to 76 BCE. This copper coin was the smallest unit of currency and was equal to the Roman quadrans. There were 192 prutat to the dinar. Archaeological evidence has uncovered tens of thousands of these tiny copper coins, showing that it was by far the most common coin in circulation in antiquity and continued to be used until the 4th century CE. Are not 2 sparrows sold for a copper coin? Matthew 10:29. And he saw also a certain poor widow putting in 2 mites. Luke 21:2. Assuredly, I say to you, some will by no means get out of there till you have paid the last penny. Matthew 5:26. A mite from the time of Alexander Jannaeus. The silver dinar. The silver dinar. The most common silver dinar at the time of Jesus had the name of Tiberius on one side, and on the other side showed a seated female figure with the words high priest, another of the emperor's titles. Most of these coins were minted in Caesarea and Cappadocia. Show me a denarius. Whose image and inscription does it have? They answered and said, Caesar's. Luke 20:24. Or what woman, having 10 silver coins, if she loses one coin, does not light a lamp, sweep the house, and search carefully until she finds it? Luke 15:8. On the next day, when he departed, he took out 2 denarii, gave them to the innkeeper, and said to him, Take care of him, and whatever more you spend, when I come again, I will repay you. Luke 10:35. The Tyrian shekel. A silver dinar from the time of Tiberius. The Tyrian shekel. The Tyrian shekel had a silver weight of about 14.2 grams of silver. This coin, minted between 126 BCE and 56 CE, was considered of dependable value, and therefore it was used for payment of the temple tax. It was worth 4 dinars, double the amount of an ordinary shekel. The task of the money changers, John 2:13-16, Matthew 21:12-13, Mark 11:15, in the temple was to change other forms of currency into the Tyrian coinage for those paying the temple tax. Not all Tyrian shekels were necessarily minted entire. In fact, after the time of Augustus, the minting of Tyrian coins entire stopped. But since payment of the temple tax was still required in this pure silver, Herod began to mint his own silver coins. What is a Tyrian silver coin? Asked the Tosefta. Ketubah 13:20. It is a Jerusalemite. Nevertheless, lest we offend them, go to the sea, cast in a hook, and take the fish that comes up first. And when you have opened its mouth, you will find a piece of money. Take that and give it to them for me and you. Matthew 17:24. The shekel of the Jewish revolt. The shekel of the Jewish revolt. The right to mint coins was accorded by sovereign nations. Therefore, when the Great Revolt broke out as a sign of independence from Rome, the revolutionaries began to mint their own coins. The coins bear Hebrew inscriptions in archaic Hebrew script and Jewish symbols, and important innovations, as even coins minted by Jewish governors prior to the revolt contained no Jewish symbols. Coins were struck from the 1st to the 5th and last year of the Great Revolt. These coins serve as poignant guides to archaeologists excavating sites from that era, as the year of the latest coin discovered tells how long the revolutionaries were able to hold out in a specific place. What would a shekel buy? In spite of the difficulties which arise in determining the exact cost of items during the lifetime of Jesus, it is interesting to look at prices as they appear in ancient texts, including the Mishnah, the New Testament, and rarely archaeological discoveries. Food, as we can see, was relatively inexpensive. We can understand this against the background of life in the days of Jesus, when most people were farmers who manufactured almost all of the goods needed in their daily lives within the family circle. A great deal of confusion arises over the use of various terms denoting the same coin. For example, the word dinar used in the price list below is the Hebrew or Aramaic form of the Latin word denarius, and would have probably been the word Jesus used. In Greek, the denarius is called a drachma. Shekel is a Hebrew word first found in Genesis 24:22 and occurring often in the Old Testament. 2 dinars were equal to 1 shekel, and 4 dinars to the more greatly valued Tyrian shekel. Vineyard worker, daily wage 1 dinar. A scribe's salary, 12 dinars a week. 1 kor, 220 liters of wheat. 1 gold Aurelius, 25 silver dinars. Cloak of a rich man, 100 to 200 dinars. Tallit, outer cloak, 12 dinars. Price for weaving a tallit, 8 dinars. A large meal, 1 dinar. 1 seah, about 2 gallons of flour, 1 dinar. Loaf of bread, 1/12 of a dinar. 1 amphora of olive oil, 1 dinar. Pomegranate, 1 pruta. Cluster of grapes, 1 pruta. Ram, 8 dinars. Lamb, 4 dinars. Calf, 20 dinars. Ox, 100 to 200 dinars. A newborn donkey foal, 2 to 4 dinars. Rental of a house for a month, 4 dinars. Bride price for a virgin, 200 dinars. A widow, 100 dinars. A woman's yearly clothing allowance from her husband, 50 dinars. A Roman soldier's salary for a year, 50 dinars. By mid-first century CE, the price of 2 pigeons had skyrocketed to 1 gold dinar, equal to 25 silver dinars, a price far beyond the means of the simple people who would purchase them to offer in the Jerusalem temple. Eventually, the sages imposed a price ceiling on this most common of sacrifices.